Welcome to this new automotive news video for Wednesday, April 29, 2026. And today we're of course going to talk about Volkswagen, which has just unveiled its electric Polo. This car will compete with the electric Renault 5, and we have new details on its price and range to discuss today. We'll also talk about Alfa Romeo, which is revealing its engine strategy for the coming years, including a return to combustion engines. We'll also talk about BYD and Mercedes, two manufacturers whose profits were significantly revised downward in the first quarter of 2026. We'll also talk about BYD for another piece of news, as it has just unveiled a new large SUV at the Beijing Motor Show, featuring record-breaking range and ultra-fast charging speed. We'll end by discussing Audi, which is again recalling its electric vehicles for a safety issue. Here are Wednesday's news stories. I hope you enjoy the video. If that's the case, as usual, I'm counting on you to show it by leaving a like, subscribing for future videos, boosting this one if the option appears for you, and of course by leaving a comment where you share your thoughts on today's news, especially about the ID Polo. If you had to choose between the electric Polo and the electric Renault 5, which one would you pick? And that's actually going to be our first topic. We're going to talk about the new electric Polo called the ID Polo, not to be confused with the ID.3 Neo. While both cars share design codes and look similar, this model is actually a compact car that's slightly larger than the ID.3 Neo, which is more of a city car. There are several exterior design elements inspired by the new generation of Volkswagen electric cars, like the large light strip at the front that connects the headlights, the backlit logo, and the silhouette. Let's say about as traditional looking as a Volkswagen gets. And at the rear, the taillights are also connected by a light strip. Inside, like all modern cars, the Volkswagen Polo will obviously offer several screens. A 10-inch screen for the digital instrument cluster, and a 13-inch central screen to manage the vehicle's infotainment. Everything from GPS to apps and everything that goes with it. Good news for some, physical buttons are back on the steering wheel, replacing a whole bunch of touch controls that were previously only available on the central screen. A choice made by Volkswagen because it's already less expensive, but also because it's much easier to use for drivers, who will be able to interact with their vehicle without having to take their eyes off the road. It's good news for the price and for driving. But on the design side, I have to admit that I find the button layout particularly ugly. There are quite a lot of them, and it feels like I'm seeing a landline phone keypad on both sides of the steering wheel. Its main rival will obviously be the Renault 5 Electric, even though the ID Polo is a little bit longer, 13 centimeters longer. A difference that directly benefits the interior space, but also the trunk space with 435 liters of storage here, compared to 326 for the Renault 5 Electric and about 350 for the current internal combustion Polo. So the trunk is overall much bigger anyway. As for the engine, it will only be 100% electric. Of course, Volkswagen will continue to sell the internal combustion versions in parallel, the previous generation. The 100% electric version will be available with 4 different power options: 115, 135, and 210 horsepower, as well as a GTI version that hasn't been detailed yet, which will arrive a bit later and will be more powerful. There will be 2 different batteries: the 37 kW LFP battery for the 115 and 135 horsepower versions, which will offer up to 329 kilometers range. This car is perfect for getting from the living room to the kitchen, but there are also versions with a bigger battery, 52 kW NMC for the more powerful versions, which offer 455 kilometers range. In any case, it offers between 15 and 40 km more range compared to the Renault 5 Electric and a higher charging speed, only for the 52 kW version, which allows it to charge from 10 to 80% in 24 minutes. Yes, it's boring aesthetically. It's Volkswagen. It probably doesn't have as much character as the Renault 5 Electric. On the other hand, what's quite interesting is that Volkswagen is aiming for an entry-level price of around 24,000 to 25,000 euros. That is like the Renault 5 Electric, which means this ID Polo probably offers a better price-to-range and price-to-versatility ratio than the Renault 5 Electric. Most importantly, we know the ID Polo will be the technical foundation for other 100% electric compact models from brands in the group. Volkswagen, like Skoda, so it's quite possible that in the coming months, we'll see a new Skoda appear with the same range and the same charging speeds as the ID Polo, at an even lower price, since Skoda is always below in terms of pricing. On a completely different topic, yesterday, the head of Alfa Romeo, Santo Facili, gave a new interview in which he shared his position, new additional information about the future of Alfa, the future of its models, and its direction. He confirmed that because at the moment the whole world is not ready to switch to electric cars, the brand will continue to focus on combustion and hybrid engines on the next generations of vehicles. He confirmed that this choice would not only apply to the new Stelvio and the new Giulia, which are expected to arrive around 2027, 2028, but also to other models in the lineup. He also specified this for the Stelvio and the Giulia, that the entry-level versions would be based on four-cylinder gasoline engines with a mild hybrid system, that the mid-range would be based on plug-in hybrid powertrains, also probably based on four-cylinder gasoline engines. And he didn't give any more information than that about the high-end models, except that the future sport models, so probably the continuation of the Quadrifoglio Verde line, will also be based on plug-in hybrids and could offer power outputs above 700 horsepower. Now, the big question is, will this also be based on a four-cylinder? In that case, it would still be much less interesting than the previous generations of Quadrifoglio. Or will future Quadrifoglio models use V6 engines, perhaps Maseratis, with a new hybrid system? We'll see. Either way, Alfa will keep making combustion engines. BYD has revealed two things in the last 24 hours. The first, which is probably good news for the brand, is a new SUV, the BYD Cillian 08. It's a large SUV. We're talking about a model that's 5.11 meters long, nearly 2 meters wide, and with a wheelbase of over 3 meters. As for power, BYD claims 640 horsepower. And where it gets particularly interesting is in terms of range and charging times. Here, BYD claims a range of 900 kilometers, but that's under the CLTC cycle, so keep in mind it's not as realistic as the WLTP cycle. You should probably expect around 750 kmol WLTP instead. It's less spectacular, but it still puts it among the best currently available in terms of range. And then, in terms of charging time, thanks to the use of BYD 2.0 LFP batteries, a new generation that supports ultra-high charging power, it should be able to charge from 10% to 97% in about 9 minutes. And there, on the other hand, it's by far much more impressive and much faster than what most brands currently offer on the European market. Still, for now, the release date in Europe has not yet been announced. And unfortunately, since in Europe it's very difficult to find charging stations more powerful than 350 kilowatts, it's very likely that in practice on our roads it will actually take around 15 to 20 minutes to fully recharge it. The second piece of news coming from BYD is a little less positive. At least for them, once again, since they're announcing their results for the first quarter of 2026, which are not good. So it's not such a big deal, because even though Chinese brands like BYD are experiencing exponential growth in Europe, their number one market, the Chinese market, is completely crashing. This is mainly due to the Chinese government's subsidy policy, which has completely changed. On one hand, manufacturers now have to manage on their own to finance their development, and on top of that, they can no longer benefit from subsidies to lower the price of their vehicles. As a result, Chinese people are simply buying fewer cars. At BYD, this drop is quite obvious, since revenue fell by 12% in the first quarter compared to the first quarter of 2025. Still, with 18.8 billion euros and profits also dropping by 55% to around 500 million euros, which isn't that impressive after all. A decline that should continue in 2026 since the Chinese market has nothing to do with last year's market anymore. Now, you should know that things aren't much better for European brands. Mercedes is also in a complicated situation. They have just published their figures for the first quarter of 2026, and here too, the drop in profits is quite impressive. Less so, but still. Down 17% to 1.9 billion euros. The revenue is also slightly below what was expected, 31.6 billion compared to 31.8 billion, and above all, and that's the big problem for European brands, the operating margin is much lower than last year. Mercedes is at a 4.1% margin so far in 2026, compared with 7.3% a year earlier. That's really not much. Normally, that brand runs at about 9% during good periods. This complicated situation is caused by two factors. The first is obviously the Chinese market, where it's become almost impossible to survive for German brands, but also the European market, where German brands now also have to face Chinese brands. And they are forced to slash their car prices or, in any case, cut into their margins. This explains the drop in profits and the decline in operating margins. But it's not the only German brand announcing bad news today, because Audi is once again forced to recall its electric models, the E-Tron range. Not for a battery problem, as is traditionally the case with this type of car, but for another safety issue that concerns the brakes. Indeed, on the Audi e-tron and also on the Audi Q8 e-tron, it is suspected that during the manufacturing of the vehicle, a screw that connects the brake pedal to the brake control unit may have been improperly tightened. So, we're talking about the electronic management of braking, a defect that can lead to a complete disconnection of the system and therefore simply prevent the vehicle from braking. That's quite a serious problem. The good news is that for now, Audi has not reported any incidents related to this problem. There have been no serious accidents or injuries. The bad news is that it's still 96,000 vehicles that need to be recalled, and also the fact that these Audi e-tron vehicles have already been recalled an unbelievable number of times. 14 different recalls for the e-tron, which is huge. So, that's it for today's news. I hope you found the video interesting. If that's the case, as usual, don't hesitate to show your support by leaving a like, subscribing, and supporting the channel by clicking the join button below this video. I'll see you tomorrow for the next news video. Bye.